The photographs hit the mahogany table with a soft thud that somehow echoed louder than my father's casket being lowered into the ground an hour earlier. 4 glossy images, each one a dagger through whatever naive trust I had left. My mother's trembling hands had delivered them to me in a sealed envelope, her hollow eyes speaking the words she couldn't form. There was my wife Elise, wrapped in the silk robe I'd bought her for our anniversary, lounging in my father's hotel room. There she was again, laughing with a wine glass raised in toast, my father's chemo treatment wristband clearly visible on his thin wrist. And the final image, the one that made my vision blur with rage, Elise in bed wearing the gold watch I'd given my father when he beat cancer the first time. Each photo was time-stamped, days when Dad had told me he was too tired to see visitors. I didn't scream. I didn't break down. I folded those photographs carefully, slipped them into my jacket pocket, and began planning the destruction of the woman I'd called my wife. My name is Daniel Greaves, and until that moment, I thought I understood my life. At 34, I was a senior accountant at Morrison & Associates, methodical by nature, loyal to a fault. I'd built my world on trust and stability, the same values my father, Robert Greaves, had instilled in me since childhood. Dad was a pillar of our community, a retired construction foreman who'd built half the houses in our suburb with his own hands. When the cancer first came for him 3 years ago, he fought it like he fought everything else, with quiet determination and stubborn pride. When it returned 6 months ago, more aggressive and hungrier, I became his primary caregiver alongside my mother, Margaret. Elise had been my wife for 8 years, my girlfriend for 2 before that. We'd met at a charity gala where she worked as an event coordinator, stunning in her red dress and magnetic smile. She was everything I wasn't: spontaneous, charming, effortlessly social. I fell hard and fast, believing I'd found my perfect complement. Throughout Dad's illness, Elise had seemed like the ideal daughter-in-law. She visited him regularly, brought him his favorite cookies, sat by his bedside reading classic novels in her melodious voice. She held my mother's hand during the worst days, organized meal trains from the neighborhood, and even helped me coordinate his medical appointments when the treatment schedule became overwhelming. "You're so lucky to have her," Dad would say whenever Elise left after one of her visits. "She's got a good heart, Danny. Hold on to that one." I thought their bond was beautiful, a testament to how perfectly Elise fit into our family. She called him Papa Robert, and he'd light up whenever she walked into the room. During his final weeks, when the morphine made him confused and agitated, Elise was often the only person who could calm him down. What I didn't know was that she was calming him down in ways that would have killed him faster than the cancer ever could. Looking back now, the signs were there like breadcrumbs leading to hell. Small things that seemed meaningless at the time, but formed a pattern of disrespect and deception that should have raised every red flag I possessed. It started with the gifts. Dad had always been generous, but during his illness, he became almost obsessively giving. Expensive jewelry would appear on Elise: a diamond tennis bracelet, pearl earrings, a designer handbag. When I asked about them, she'd smile sweetly and say, "Papa Robert insisted. You know how he worries about me not having nice things." The stories felt off, but questioning my dying father's generosity seemed petty and cruel. Dad had money saved up, pension funds and insurance policies. If he wanted to spoil his daughter-in-law during his final months, who was I to object? Then there were the private moments. I'd arrive at Dad's house to find Elise already there, sometimes emerging from his bedroom looking flushed and slightly disheveled. He was having trouble with his medication, she'd explain. I was just helping him get comfortable. Her explanations always sounded reasonable, but there was something in her eyes, a flicker of satisfaction that made my stomach turn. The phone calls became more frequent and secretive. Elise would step outside to take calls, speaking in hushed tones with someone she claimed was coordinating care services. When I offered to help with the logistics, She'd wave me off. "I've got it handled, honey. You work so hard already." Dad's behavior toward me began to change, too. He became distant, almost guilty in my presence. Conversations that used to flow naturally became stilted and uncomfortable. He'd avoid eye contact when discussing his care needs, and several times I caught him and Elise sharing looks that seemed to exclude me entirely. The most disturbing sign was Dad's sudden interest in updating his will and estate planning. He'd mentioned it casually during one of our visits, but when I offered to help him navigate the legal paperwork, he brushed me off. "Elise is helping me with all that," he said. "She's got a good head for these things." My wife was spending more time managing my dying father's affairs than I was. At the time, I was grateful for her involvement. Now I realize I was watching her groom her mark. The breaking point should have been the day I found them together in his study, huddled over financial documents spread across his desk. They jumped apart when I entered, Dad shoving papers into a drawer while Elise busied herself arranging flowers that didn't need arranging. "Just helping Papa Robert organize some old files," she said, but her voice had a breathless quality that set off every alarm bell in my head. I should have confronted them then. I should have demanded answers, searched through those documents, or at minimum asked hard questions about what kind of organizing required such secrecy. Instead, I chose trust over suspicion. I chose love over logic. I chose to be a fool. The moment of absolute clarity came not with the photographs. Those only confirmed what my soul already knew. But 3 days later, sitting in my father's empty house, going through his final papers with my mother. Mom was a wreck, barely able to string sentences together, so I handled most of the practical arrangements. That's when I found the bank statements hidden in Dad's desk drawer, the same drawer he'd been so quick to close when I'd walked in on him and Elise. $27,000, gone, transferred in chunks over the past 4 months to an account I didn't recognize. The timing corresponded perfectly with Dad's most aggressive treatment period, when he was weakest and most vulnerable. But it was the accompanying paperwork that made my blood freeze. Gift documentation. Legal forms declaring the money as voluntary presents to beloved daughter-in-law Elise Marie Greaves for her devoted care and companionship during a difficult time. Companionship. The word felt like acid in my mouth. My mother found me staring at those papers, my hands shaking with rage I didn't know I possessed. When I showed her the documents, she collapsed into the wingback chair Dad used to read in, sobbing in a way that sounded like dying. "I knew," she whispered between gasps. "God help me, Danny. I knew something was wrong. The way she looked at him, the way he started hiding things from me. But he was dying, and I thought maybe I was just being a jealous old woman." That's when she told me about the photographs. How she'd hired a private investigator 3 weeks before Dad died, not to catch Elise, but to prove her own suspicions wrong. How the envelope had sat unopened on her kitchen counter until the funeral, because she'd been too afraid to face the truth. "I gave them to you because you deserved to know," she said, "but also because you're the only one strong enough to do something about it." Sitting there in Dad's study, surrounded by the evidence of my wife's manipulation and my father's betrayal, I felt something fundamental shift inside me. The man who had trusted blindly, who had chosen to see the best in people, who had built his life on naive optimism. That man died in that moment. What emerged was someone harder, colder, more calculating. I looked at my broken mother and made her a promise. She won't get away with this. I'll make sure she pays for every dollar, every lie, every moment she stole from him, from us. The grief could wait. The mourning could wait. First, there would be justice. I spent the next week in a state of controlled fury, meticulously planning Elise's destruction with the same attention to detail I brought to complex financial audits. Every action had to be calculated. Every move had to serve the larger strategy. This wasn't about emotional satisfaction. This was about systematic annihilation. Step 1 was research. I discovered that Dad had made me co-trustee of his estate 6 months earlier, when his oncologist had noted early signs of cognitive decline from the chemotherapy. It was a precautionary measure I'd forgotten about in the chaos of his care, but it gave me legal authority that Elise didn't know I possessed. While she assumed she'd inherit everything as my spouse, the trust documents contained a clause that would become her undoing. Any party proven to have committed moral turpitude, elder exploitation, or coercion shall be excluded from all inheritance, including spousal provisions. Dad's lawyer, Harold Brennan, had included that language at my insistence years earlier, back when we'd heard horror stories about caregivers manipulating elderly clients. I'd never imagined it would apply to my own wife. Step 2 was evidence gathering. I hired Marcus Chen, a forensic accountant who specialized in elder fraud cases. Marcus was expensive, but his reputation for uncovering hidden financial crimes was legendary. Within 48 hours, he'd traced every unauthorized transfer from Dad's accounts, documented the pattern of gifts that coincided with Elise's increased access, and identified several additional transactions I hadn't even discovered. The digital evidence was equally damning. I had access to our family's shared cloud storage, which included automatic backups of Elise's phone. Marcus helped me recover deleted text messages between Elise and Dad, some of which were so explicit they made me physically ill. There were also emails discussing their meetings, with Dad expressing guilt about betraying Danny, while Elise reassured him that what he doesn't know won't hurt him. Step 3 involved the hotels. Using Dad's reward program account, I obtained detailed booking histories that showed a pattern of regular reservations at upscale properties across the city. The dates matched perfectly with days Dad had claimed to be too sick for visitors. Credit card records showed he'd paid for room service, spa treatments, and expensive bottles of wine on those same dates. I even found receipts for the silk robe Elise wore in one of the photographs, purchased by Dad from a high-end boutique 3 days before their first documented hotel encounter. But the most devastating evidence came from an unexpected source. My cousin Rachel, who worked as a nurse at Dad's oncology clinic. When I mentioned my concerns about Dad's final months, she revealed that Elise had actually bragged to her about her special relationship with Papa Robert. She said something about helping him die happy and laughed about how grateful he was for her company, Rachel told me, her voice filled with disgust. I thought she was just being inappropriate, but now... God, Danny, I should have said something. I had Rachel write a detailed statement about their conversation, including the exact date and location. It was another nail in Elise's coffin. Step 4 was the legal trap. I met with Harold Brennan and presented the complete evidence package. Harold had practiced estate law for 30 years and had seen every kind of family drama imaginable, but even he was shocked by the scope of Elise's manipulation. "This is textbook elder exploitation," he said, reviewing the timeline of gifts and hotel visits. "Your father was in a chemically compromised state, dealing with terminal illness, and she took advantage of his vulnerability for financial gain. We can not only exclude her from the inheritance, we can pursue criminal charges." I instructed Harold to prepare the formal exclusion documents while I handled the next phase of the plan. Step 5 was financial warfare. Using my authority as co-trustee, I froze all joint accounts pending investigation of potential fraud. I revoked Elise's access to our shared credit cards and had the locks changed on our house, which was technically owned by a family trust that predated our marriage. I also filed a formal complaint with Adult Protective Services, providing them with copies of all evidence. This triggered an official investigation into elder exploitation, making Elise the subject of an active criminal inquiry. Throughout this entire process, I maintained perfect normalcy at home. I grieved appropriately for my father, comforted my mother, and played the role of devoted husband. Elise had no idea that her world was about to collapse. The estate reading was scheduled for 3 weeks after the funeral. That would be her judgment day. The morning of the estate reading, I woke up feeling calmer than I had in months. Elise was already up, standing in front of our bedroom mirror applying lipstick with the same precision she'd once used to manipulate my dying father. "I picked out something appropriate," she said, gesturing to her black designer dress. "Harold said this could take a while, so I want to be comfortable." "You look perfect," I replied, and I meant it. She looked exactly like the kind of woman who would seduce a cancer patient for inheritance money. We drove to Harold's office in separate cars. I claimed I had errands to run afterward. The truth was, I didn't want to be anywhere near her when her world imploded. The conference room was full when I arrived. My mother sat at one end of the long mahogany table, flanked by my Uncle Tom and Aunt Sarah. Several distant relatives had flown in for the reading, including my father's brother Michael and his wife Janet. They all greeted Elise warmly when she arrived, offering condolences and praising her devotion to Dad during his final months. If they only knew. Elise took a seat directly across from Harold, confident and poised. She wore the pearl earrings Dad had bought her, probably thinking they made her look appropriately grief-stricken. To everyone else, she appeared to be the perfect grieving daughter-in-law. Harold opened his leather portfolio and adjusted his reading glasses. "Before we begin with the standard bequeathments," he said, "I need to address a significant amendment to Robert's trust, executed and witnessed 3 weeks prior to his death." He slid a thick folder across the table to Elise. "Due to documented misconduct and moral violation, Mrs. Elise Marie Greaves is hereby excluded from all inheritance provisions, including spousal benefits." The room went dead silent. Elise stared at the folder as if it might burst into flames. "I don't understand," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Please review the documentation," Harold continued. "You'll find photographs, financial records, hotel receipts, and witness statements that detail your inappropriate relationship with the deceased during his final months of life." Elise opened the folder with trembling hands. I watched her face drain of color as she saw the first photograph. Herself in Dad's hotel room, wearing that damned silk robe. Her hand flew to her mouth, and for a moment I thought she might vomit. This isn't, she stammered, but Harold held up a hand. "The evidence speaks for itself, Mrs. Greaves. Bank records show $27,000 in unauthorized gifts obtained through elder manipulation. Digital communications recovered from your devices contain explicitly inappropriate content with a terminally ill man under your care." Uncle Michael leaned forward, his face twisted with disgust. "What the hell is he talking about, Elise?" She looked around the table desperately, seeking support that would never come. When her eyes met mine, I stared back with complete indifference. "Danny," she pleaded, "you have to know this is some kind of mistake. I loved your father. I would never—" "The audio recording says otherwise," Harold interrupted, sliding another document across the table. "This is a sworn statement from Nurse Rachel Greaves, who witnessed you laughing about helping Robert die happy and expressing satisfaction with his gratitude for your companionship." Elise lunged for the documents, knocking over her water glass. "These are lies! Someone set me up! Danny, you know me! You know I wouldn't do this!" But I said nothing. I just sat there, watching her panic with the same detached interest I might observe a bug trapped in amber. Harold continued reading. "As of this morning, Mrs. Greaves has been formally evicted from the Greaves family property under legal authority of the family trust. Her personal belongings are being packed by a bonded moving service and will be delivered to a storage unit registered in her name." "You can't do this!" she screamed, standing so abruptly her chair toppled backward. "I'm his wife. I have rights." "You forfeited those rights when you chose to exploit a dying man," Harold replied calmly. "Additionally, you should be aware that formal charges for elder exploitation have been filed with the district attorney's office. You'll likely be contacted by investigators within the next few days." The room erupted in shocked murmurs. My relatives stared at Elise with a mixture of horror and revulsion. My mother was crying silently, whether from relief or renewed grief I couldn't tell. Elise tried to run from the room, but her heels caught on the thick carpet and she stumbled into the wall. She looked back at me one final time, her face streaked with mascara and twisted with desperation. "How could you do this to me?" she whispered. I stood up slowly, straightened my tie, and spoke my first and last words to her. "I didn't do anything to you, Elise. I simply gave you exactly what you deserved." The destruction of Elise Marie Greaves was swift and absolute. Within 24 hours of the estate reading, her credit cards were canceled, her bank accounts frozen, and her employment at Morrison Events terminated for violation of their morality clause. The company couldn't risk association with someone under investigation for elder exploitation, especially since many of their clients were wealthy seniors. The legal consequences came next. The district attorney's office moved quickly on the elder abuse charges, treating the case as a priority due to the clear documentation and vulnerable victim. Elise's lawyer, a bottom feeder named Jacoby, who specialized in defending white-collar criminals, dropped her as a client when she couldn't make the first payment. She tried representing herself in court, but Harold's evidence package was overwhelming. The hotel receipts, the photographs, the recovered text messages, and Rachel's witness testimony painted a picture of calculated predation that no jury would ignore. But it was the social destruction that satisfied me most. Rachel had strategically shared the story with a popular local lifestyle blogger who specialized in cautionary tales about marriage and relationships. Within 48 hours, Elise became the subject of a viral post titled, "The Woman Who Seduced Her Dying Father-in-Law for Inheritance Money." The story spread across social media like wildfire. Screenshots of the blog post appeared on neighborhood Facebook groups, professional networking sites, and community bulletin boards. Everyone in our social circle knew what she'd done. Her friends abandoned her immediately. The women who used to admire her style and charm now saw her as a predator who couldn't be trusted around their own elderly relatives. Former colleagues refused to return her calls. The contractors and vendors she'd worked with for years suddenly had no availability for her projects. The eviction became official on a Tuesday morning. I drove by the house around noon and watched from across the street as uniformed movers loaded her belongings into a truck. She stood on the sidewalk in wrinkled clothes, clutching a single suitcase, watching 8 years of accumulated possessions disappear into storage. She tried living in a series of increasingly cheap motels, but word of her crimes had spread through the hospitality industry. Managers who recognized her name from news reports found reasons to deny her extended stays. She was toxic, bad for business, and worse for reputation. I had Marcus monitor her financial situation through legitimate channels. Within 6 weeks, she was completely broke. The storage unit fees consumed what little money she had left, and when she couldn't make payments, her belongings were auctioned off to cover the debt. The jewelry Dad had bought her, those expensive symbols of her manipulation, ended up in pawn shops across the city, sold for pennies on the dollar to keep her fed for another few days. She tried reaching out to distant family members, but the criminal charges and media coverage had reached them too. No one wanted to harbor someone under investigation for elder abuse. The few relatives who might have helped were too afraid of being associated with her crimes. I learned from Rachel that Elise had attempted to get a job at a nursing home on the other side of the state, but the background check revealed her pending charges. No healthcare facility would risk hiring someone accused of exploiting vulnerable seniors. Her last known address was a homeless shelter downtown, but even there she couldn't stay long. The other residents had seen the news stories and made it clear she wasn't welcome among them. 3 months after the estate reading, I received a call from Harold. The criminal case had concluded with Elise pleading guilty to elder exploitation in exchange for a reduced sentence. She would serve 18 months in county jail, followed by 5 years of probation. She was also ordered to pay full restitution for the money she'd stolen from Dad, though everyone knew she'd never have the means to do so. "She asked me to give you a message," Harold said. "She wanted you to know she was sorry and that she hopes someday you can forgive her." I hung up without responding. 2 weeks later, I drove to Dad's grave for the first time since the funeral. The headstone was simple granite with his name, dates, and the inscription, "Beloved Father and Husband." Fresh flowers from my mother adorned the base. I pulled 2 items from my jacket pocket. The first was the gold watch I'd given Dad when he beat cancer the first time, the same watch Elise had worn so proudly in that final photograph. I'd recovered it from the evidence locker after her conviction. The second was a printout of her final bank statement, obtained through the restitution proceedings. Account balance, 27 cents. I placed both items against the headstone and spoke the only words I'd ever speak at my father's grave. "You gave her everything she wanted. I gave her everything she deserved." The watch caught the afternoon sunlight, its gold surface reflecting light like the tears I still couldn't shed. Not for him, not for her, not for the man I used to be before I learned that trust was just another word for weakness. I walked back to my car without looking back. There was nothing left to mourn and nothing left to forgive. Elise Marie Greaves had gotten exactly what she'd earned through months of calculated manipulation and betrayal. Justice wasn't supposed to feel this empty, but it was the only emotion I had left. I drove home to my mother, who was making dinner in the kitchen where Dad used to read his evening paper. She looked up when I entered, her eyes searching my face for some sign of closure or peace. "Did it help?" she asked quietly. I considered lying, telling her that visiting his grave had brought me comfort or resolution. But the truth was simpler and sadder. "It's finished," I said. And it was. Elise was gone. Dad was gone. And the man I'd been before the photographs was gone too. What remained was someone harder, colder, and infinitely more careful about whom he chose to trust. I sat down at the kitchen table where Elise used to charm my parents with stories of her day, where she'd played the role of loving daughter-in-law while planning the seduction of my dying father. The empty chair across from me would stay empty. Outside, winter was coming early. The leaves were already turning, preparing to fall and be forgotten, just like her. And that's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed it, please give this video a thumbs up and drop a comment below. Your support helps the algorithm push my content further. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It really helps me keep creating more stories for you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.